Hello and welcome back to Israel with Aline. Today we are going together to Cana of Galilee, the city where Jesus performed his first miracle, where he turned water into wine. But was it really wine or grape juice? Let's go there to know this place and also find out a bit more about whether it was juice or wine. So, if you are ready, let's get started. We have arrived at Cana of Galilee, or as it is known today, Kfar Cana. Kfar means the village, so today it is known as the village of Cana. Very different from how it was in biblical times. The Bible says that Cana was the main city and Nazareth was a small town, a small village near here. Nazareth is still close to here, a 20-minute drive, but Cana will turn into a small village and Nazareth will become the largest and most important city in all of Galilee. That is, the roles are reversed, and in Cana today live a little over 20,000 people. And here in Cana of Galilee, one of the apostles was also born and lived, as it is written in John chapter 21, verse 2. Simon Peter, Thomas called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. So this church was built here in honor of the apostle Nathanael, also known as Bartholomew. Since that time, it was common for people to have more than one name, a Jewish name and also a more international name of the time. Another example, for instance, is Paul. The international name that we know to this day is Paul, but he was also called Shaul, Saul in Hebrew. And so we see Peter also with the Hebrew name Shimon, and many other apostles also had 2 variations of their name. And while we're on our way to the wedding church, the place where Jesus performed his first miracle, it's important to remember that he performed 2 miracles here in Cana. The other miracle is the miracle of healing, as written in John 4. The second time Jesus went to Cana of Galilee, where he had turned water into wine. And there was a nobleman there whose son was sick in Capernaum. Hearing that Jesus was coming from Judea to Galilee, he went to meet him. And he begged him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and miracles, will you not believe?" The nobleman said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son lives." And the man believed the word that Jesus had spoken to him, and he went his way. As he was now going down, his servants met him. And they reported saying, "Your son lives." And we are not the only ones who came to visit the church today. In the background, you can hear a group arriving. They are a group of Christians from Eritrea. And I think it's super cool that in the song we can recognize a word which is the word Cana. And this shows us that faith has no borders or language. Music. And here in front of us, we already see the wedding church. The church was built on the site where the wedding took place, where Jesus turned water into wine or juice. We will talk about this at the end. But this place is very special because of this miracle, and that's why thousands of people come here every year to get married. So on a normal day, if you come to this church, you will see brides walking back and forth. I mean, there's love in the air, spirituality in the air, and without a doubt, it's a unique church.
So let's go in and get to know a little bit about the modern church, and then we'll also talk about the miracle itself.
This church was built in 1881, and I think it's the first time I've been in here, and there's no wedding going on and no renewal of marriage vows. It's really different to see this place so empty. And this church was built on older remains that we are going to see together now. But what was found? A house was found from the time of Jesus that was used between the 1st and 4th centuries, which makes a lot of sense, since most weddings at that time were held at home. Above this house, a Byzantine synagogue was found, which hasn't been in use for a long time. And above this synagogue, Byzantine remains were found. Some tombs were found, and an apex was also found. The apex is the main part of the church where the altar is, indicating that yes, Christians have been coming here to pray since Byzantine times, and later, during the Crusader period, a church will be built here, and above all this, the modern church that we just saw. But I'm sure you want to go with me to see the remains from the time of Jesus, so let's go. We have now arrived at the level of the city in Brazil, the wine. And Mary goes and says, Jesus, the wine is finished. And he will respond, isn't my time come yet? Until that moment, we remember that Jesus had not started his public life, and therefore, until that moment, his time had not come. But Mary will say, do everything as he commands. And then he orders to fill 6 jars with water. Not jars, jugs. Is this a jug? The jugs are water reservoirs. And it's not just any jug, folks. Here in the archaeological excavations, they found it. So there are theories that say that maybe this is one of the 6 original jugs. And this fits very well with the biblical text, which says that the jugs were for the purification of the Jews. That is, a water reservoir used to purify objects or the hands of the Jews who were at the ceremony. And these reservoirs at that time were made of stone, so it makes a lot of sense that this is the original jug, or that it is one like this. And that's why, folks, get out of your heads that image of the 6 little jars, but rather 6 jugs. It is estimated that each jug could hold up to 26.42 gallons. So imagine the servants now, not understanding what's happening, coming and filling now, perhaps up to 158.5 gallons of water. And as it is written in John 2, and Jesus said to them, take now and bring to the master of the feast. And they brought. And when the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, every man serves the good wine first. And when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This passage shows us that not only did Jesus make wine, but he made a large amount and of the best quality. But most importantly, in my opinion at least, is that those who witnessed the first miracle were precisely the servants, the simplest people who were in the house, who saw the water being put in and the wine coming out of the jars. And now we're going to talk about the controversial issue of whether the wine was really wine or if it was grape juice. But the first thing I want to say, folks, is that my answer doesn't mean whether you have to or don't have to drink wine, have to drink alcohol. This is a matter for each church, each community, and each individual. Having said that, what we are going to use today are historical and archaeological findings and biblical texts to better understand what was drunk at that time. Let's start with the question more accepted by the majority, that alcoholic wine did exist since biblical times. We can even start with the book of Genesis. Noah, is he going to drink wine and get drunk? We also know Lot's daughters, who are going to get their own father drunk. We see several passages which I will be putting up here for you to see exactly which passages I am referring to. That alcoholic wine and alcoholic beverages did exist and that they could indeed intoxicate. And that's why there was even a type of people who were the Nazarites, who had a vow of abstinence, who had a vow not to drink wine and alcoholic beverages. Despite the Bible telling us about the existence of wine, it is completely against drunkenness. And this is a very important point as we see in Ephesians. And do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. And now speaking specifically about Roman times, the era in which Jesus lived, we know that there were many types of wine in the Roman Empire. More specifically, Pliny the Elder, who was a Roman writer and historian, mentions more than 150 types of alcoholic wines. One of them was called possum, which was a wine made from raisins. Yes, it's a wine very different from what we know today, but they dried the grapes and then produced a wine that had a very sweet taste, but yes, it was alcoholic. And we found in archaeological excavations here in Israel, in Lachish, jars of this same type of wine, wine from black grapes, as they call it, that is raisin wines. So we know that alcoholic wine has existed since biblical times, and that the Romans were big fans of wine. They had many types of wine and used to drink a lot. Now, why did they drink so much wine? Because water in ancient times was not always drinkable, it was often contaminated, and so alcoholic wine helped to make it healthier, so to speak, less contaminating, meaning it caused people to have fewer intestinal problems, killed bacteria, and helped public health. But they didn't drink wine as we imagine wine these days. Yes, the Romans used to dilute their wine. It could be 1 part wine to 2 parts water. Or, as Pliny the Elder mentions, 1 part wine to 8 parts water. I mean, they drank a lot, but they drank their wine extremely diluted. In fact, Paul talks about diluted wine to prevent diseases when he tells Timothy not to drink only water, but to dilute a little wine for the ailments and for the stomach. But let's talk more specifically about Jewish traditions in relation to wine. We know that the Jewish tradition in biblical times and even today is to serve alcoholic wine at weddings. We also know this from the passage of the miracle at the wedding in John 2:10, when it is written that the master of the feast says that the best wine was always given at the beginning. And when people had already drunk well, then the cheaper wine was given. What does drunk well mean? In Greek, in the original, it is written metio, which is another word for drunk. This means that people drank, and when they were a little drunk, they started to give out cheap wine. I imagine that there are people who still do this to this day. But when the host of the party receives the wine that Jesus made, without knowing where it came from, he says that this wine is better than the best wine at the party. And the tradition of good wines and grape juice continues to this day here in the region of Cana and Galilee. And we are now going together to a place that has wine from Cana. We have now arrived at Anwar's store. They are a family of Christian Arabs from Cana who have been here for generations and generations. Anwar in Arabic means light, so it would be like the name Lucio in Portuguese. And they are now going to show us how they produce wine here in Cana. They have wine with and without alcohol. And of course, I couldn't come here and not have a little taste of the wine, so Shalom Anwar.
Shalom, shalom.
I asked
him to put a little of the wine of Cana for us, but without alcohol, first because of the baby. But here we can see that there is non-alcoholic wine used by some churches. There is wine with alcohol. There is something for all tastes and also for all budgets. We are seeing here, for example, the wine that is 15 years old, and a very different thing that is here are these wines, which are made from pomegranate and not grape. And I want to teach you now a word in Hebrew, which is lekaim, which means to life. And this is how we toast then. L'chaim then, a little bit of Cana wine to sweeten our day. L'chaim, to life and everyone's health. As we saw, the wine in biblical times could be alcoholic. It could also be diluted with water. But the Bible clearly speaks against drunkenness. And so we have to make this point very clear. Drinking and getting drunk are not the same thing. And the Bible tells us not to get drunk. But the most important thing about this city is that here in Cana of Galilee happened the first of Jesus' miracles that opens the doors to his ministry and public life. And for the whole region here in Galilee, that will see so many miracles. If you want to know more about the Holy Land, Israel, and the miracles here in Galilee and throughout the country, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. There are videos every Wednesday and Sunday.
a kiss and see you next time.